How's it going, guys? I'm Mike Dwyer from the Bunker Recordings and BetterMixes.com, and I've got a cool little trick for you today to show you how to clear up some room in your mix for your vocals. So I've got a pop rock track that I'm mixing, and for the most part, I like how everything's sounding, but the vocals and the rhythm guitars are just fighting each other a little bit. And just before we get into this tip can really work with any two elements of a mix. It doesn't have to be guitars and vocal. That's just the most common area where I use it. But it could be between two different guitar parts if you've got two guitars that are fighting each other, or a vocal and a synth, or guitars and synths, or just anything that's kind of fighting for the same frequency range. So let's take a quick listen to part of this song and see what we're working with.
Now the stories that they'll tell will all be of happy endings, and they'll look at us in disbelief of everything that they're seeing.
So like I said, I'm pretty much happy with this, but I just want to make a little bit more room for the vocals. I really don't want to turn the vocals up or the rhythm guitars down, because overall I'm happy with the balance. And I really don't want to EQ my guitars differently to make more room for the vocals, because when the singer's not singing, I'm really happy with the sound of the guitars. So the way we're going to solve this is with sidechain dynamic EQ. So the first step is on my vocal, I'm setting that to bus 1. And then over here on my rhythm guitars, I'm going to bring up an instance of FabFilter's Pro Q3. You can still do this if you don't have this plugin. You can use any dynamic EQ or even any multiband compressor, as long as it has a sidechain input. So you can see here we have our sidechain set to bus 1, where we're sending our vocal. And then a handy feature in Pro Q3 is down here I can set the analyzer to show me both the input of our guitars and the sidechain, which in this case is our vocal. So we can see both of those at the same time in the analyzer. Let's check that out.
Now the stories that they'll tell will all be of happy endings.
And you might notice these red bars here, and that's another cool feature of this EQ. Those red areas are areas where the plugin thinks there might be some conflict between the two instruments. Obviously, you're not going to want to just follow that blindly. You're going to want to use your ear to make sure you're cutting the right areas, but it's a handy little feature. In this case, it looked like it was showing us maybe around 2.5K was a problem area, and maybe, I don't know, down around 200 hertz. Now, the 200 hertz area I don't want to touch, because I don't want to be taking out the low end of our guitar, because that might make it really thin sounding. In this case, I want to do a mid-range cut, because I think that's what's going to clear things up and make room for the vocal. So I'm going to try to grab some of that 2K area that the plugin was pointing out, but I also want to get a little lower, maybe down in like the 600 or 700 hertz area. So I'm going to do a cut here, and I'm going to make it nice and wide, so we're getting that whole area, maybe something like that. So we're going up to like 2.5K and all the way down to like 600 hertz. But we'll probably tweak that a little bit once we hear it in context. Oops, and I made that a normal cut, but I do not want a normal cut. I want a dynamic cut. So there we go. So how we have it at the moment, the plugin's going to be ducking down the mid-range of the guitars when there's a lot of mid-range in the guitars. But that's not what we want. We want it to be ducking the mid-range of the guitars when the vocal is in. So for that, we need to tell the plugin to look at the sidechain input. Now where this setting is going to be different in every plugin, but most of it will have a button that says like internal, external sidechain or something like that. In Pro Q3, you go down here and click this auto button, and then you click this little button here. And now it's going to be looking at the external sidechain. In this case, our vocal. So now I'm going to solo up our guitars and our vocal. I'm going to hit play, and I'm going to adjust our threshold, and then how much gain reduction we're actually doing until things clear up.
Now the stories that they'll tell will all be of happy endings, and they'll look at us in disbelief of everything that they're seeing. Love's not a word you just throw around for anyone to catch it. Now the stories that they'll tell will all be of happy endings, and they'll look at us in disbelief of everything that they're seeing.
All right, so that's working pretty well for me. You can see I'm only doing a little bit, like maybe 2 or 3 decibels of reduction, but that's just enough to get the guitars out of the way of the vocal without changing the sound of the guitars too much. Now, real quick, I'm going to go really extreme with the settings just so you can really hear what it's doing.
Now the stories that they'll tell will all be of happy endings, and they'll look at us in disbelief of everything.
And actually, let me go to the chorus where there's more room in between the vocal lines.
All for me, all that I am, all that I'm not.
So you can see in that big break there, the plugin wasn't doing anything at all to our guitars. And then even in the small breaks, it was letting up quite a bit. But then when the vocal was in and when it was loud, it was really clamping down on it. Now, obviously, these settings are way too extreme. We're doing way too much. So let me just go back to where we were. Something like that's cool. So yeah, we're doing just a little under 3 decibels. Even that might be a little too much, but it's good enough for now. So let's listen one more time with our guitars and vocals soloed. And I'm going to flip this plugin in and out so you can hopefully hear the difference it's making.
Now the stories that they'll tell will all be of happy endings, and they'll look at us in disbelief of everything that they're seeing. Love's not a word you just throw around for anyone to catch it.
So yeah, when it was bypassed, the vocals were just kind of fighting with the guitars, just a little bit unclear, a little bit cloudy. But then with it in, it sounded much, much clearer, and you could hear every word she was saying perfectly, and they really weren't fighting anymore, but the guitars still sounded more or less the same. We weren't drastically altering our guitar tone. So let's do that same thing one more time, but this time in the context of the full mix.
Now the stories that they'll tell will all be of happy endings, and they'll look at us in disbelief of everything that they're seeing. Love's not a word you just throw around for anyone to catch it.
So yeah, just a little bit less congested with it in. And like I said, it doesn't have to be with vocals and guitar. I've often used this technique on 2 guitar parts that were fighting for the same space, or a synth and a guitar that were fighting for the same space. So there's a ton of uses for this. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, be sure to leave a thumbs up and subscribe, and head on over to bettermixes.com to grab a free copy of my ultimate EQ cheat sheet.